Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the plight of Shyvana and how Riot's support of alternate playstyles has ultimately hurt more than it's helped in the case of this specific champion. Now, Shyvana has been feeling pretty disappointing to play for quite a while, and it's even worse when buffs show up on the PvE, you excitedly check it, and unfortunately they are all buffs to her AP playstyle, which has been the sort of most meta way or preferred way of playing the champion for quite some time now. And this is pretty disappointing because I feel like at the end of the day, it's not really core to what the character is all about, nor do I feel like it's where Riot should be putting the most support for the character, especially given that there's just a lot of, I think, thematic dissonance with Shyvana as an AP champion versus an AD champion or a type of fighter. So let's go ahead and talk through this issue and the situation a little bit more. So a ways back, Riot made a promise to show more support for alternate playstyles or builds for specific champions, things like AP Kog'Maw, AP Ezreal, AD Twisted Fate, and of course AP Shyvana. Now this wasn't necessarily a bad thing, as most of the champions who have alternate playstyles have kept their main playstyles intact over time, right? You'll see an AD occasionally, you'll see an AP Kog'Maw occasionally, but those are sort of one-off things that exist and are totally build paths for those champions, but which aren't necessarily the most preferred way of playing those champions. And that's where you want it to be, I think, is you want the alternate playstyle to exist, and you want it to be a thing that you can play with reasonable amounts of competence, but you don't want this to be the kind of thing where, you know, it takes over for the main way that the champion is built. The biggest thing, though, is that Shyvana's been suffering for quite some time, and I feel like a lot of the changes that were made since Riot committed to supporting these alternate playstyles have sort of eventually forced her out of her preferred build paths. Now, she's been a weird champion since her launch, which sort of lines up with her release window. A lot of the champions that were put out during the same time period as Shyvana were when Riot were releasing a new champion every 2 weeks, which is crazy fast when you consider it. And really, when you look back on the champions that were released and their rework rate, you'll see that they almost are 1-to-1, right? Almost every single champion that was released in this time period, champions like Urgot or Sejuani or Victor or Cassiopeia, were either extremely unpopular at the time of their release, or potentially even still are, or had a major thematic rework or kit rework, or both, as the case might be for some of these champions. And Shyvana is exactly in that boat as well. She's an AD fighter that does a lot of magic damage and has an ultimate that doesn't have a cooldown, and there's sort of a lot of different things going on with Shyvana. And so, despite this, Shyvana did see pro play as a main tank in the top lane, who eventually swapped over to an on-hit build with Devour and Blade of the Rune King, as famously played by High of Cloud9. But either way, so you have these sort of alternate playstyles, like I said, and Shyvana eventually was sort of nerfed out of both of these roles because, you know, there various systems changes happened, and Shyvana did receive a couple of sort of mini reworks in her own right, especially to how her dragon abilities worked, which eventually gave us the big sort of flame explosion that leaves the burning ground afterwards, and that was sort of the catalyst for AP Shyvana because of the ratios present on that and Riot's continually buffing the AP ratios and the magic damage that these abilities did. So because Shyvana felt so bad to play in her previous two iterations, right, the full tank build and the on-hit build, it eventually became more preferable to play Shyvana in a form that didn't have to worry about those, and since the AP ratios were so good and since she could do so much damage from pretty safe, the AP build sort of slowly took over, and I do feel like this is a bad thing for two major reasons here. First of which is that the AP Shyvana build doesn't take advantage of the full champion kit, which Riot themselves have said is problematic. We talked about this a little bit with Kog'Maw, but I'll get to that here in a sec. And it has a lot of thematic dissonance, as I've kind of been talking about before. The biggest thing here is that Riot, back in the day, there was the mini rework that had Kog'Maw gain like 5 attacks a second when his W was active, something along those lines. Is that rework specifically disincentivized ever learning Q, because Q just didn't do enough for Kog'Maw. There wasn't any reason to put points into it, and so literally the champion did not learn his Q until he absolutely had to put points into it, right? Like, there was literally no other reason for Kog'Maw to learn that ability because it was irrelevant to the build path, and Riot essentially, eventually, they nerfed it down, and they said, you know, hey, this isn't something we actually want to be present in the game, right? It doesn't make sense for a champion to not need to make use of their full champion kit. So we are going to, you know, either nerf down other parts of Kog'Maw or buff up his Q in order to actually make it so that Kog'Maw wants to use his entire champion kit. And in this regard, I feel like a similar explanation can be given for where Shyvana is at, right? AP Shyvana doesn't use anything except for her E. Her Q is only relevant because it helps her get back to her ultimate faster. Her ultimate is just an E upgrade, or potentially a way for her to run away, and her W is a way for her to get in range to Fireball or get out of range of enemies that are trying to run her down. In a similar fashion to how Nidalee back in the day used to have two forms, her spear throwing form and her runaway form. She didn't end up needing Cougar form for anything other than constant pouncing away from danger. And so in that regard, I feel like Riot do have a lot of opportunities and a lot of potential to, then want to change Shyvana in some way in order to make her incentivized to actually need her full kit, especially in regards to AP. And while Riot have buffed up the AP ratios, or given her an AP ratio on her Q and buffed up the AP ratios on her W, I feel like that's not enough at the end of the day, because the champion is safest when it's firing fireballs at you from 100 yards away, right? This champion does not want to commit to a fight ever if built AP, unless there is overwhelmingly the ability to just sort of run down enemy champions and destroy them instantly, right? Because unfortunately, Shyvana doesn't have any durability if built AP. Shyvana doesn't really have any itemization that she can go in that build that gives her a lot of durability. You can kind of get some health from a couple of different items like Rylai's or Demonic Embrace, right? So there are a couple of different ways that you can kind of get the champion to be slightly durable, and obviously she can get durable thanks to her passive if you're able to kill enough Drakes, but generally speaking, it's just there isn't enough to make Shyvana want to commit to fights, and that means that she doesn't need to use her full kit, and that is a problem. The other issue, of course, is the thematic dissonance. Shyvana is a big, scary dragon warrior. She's the kind of champion that you see committing to a fight and tearing at enemies with her blades before she transforms into a dragon and tears you apart with her claws and her flame breath while surrounded by foes, right? That's the sort of thematic you would expect to see from Shyvana. That's this kind of champion fantasy that you would expect to see from this champion, and unfortunately, that's not where we're at all with this champion, right? This is the kind of champion that very much so only ever wants to throw fireballs at you from 100 yards away when built in this AP fashion. And that's why, one of the biggest reasons why I think AP is sort of a problem. No one is going to look at this champion, right? A new player's not going to look at Shyvana and say, oh yeah, that champion wants a Rabadon's Death Cap and a bunch of magical staves, right? Like, there's no way. And so in this regard, I feel like Riot need to essentially take Shyvana back and take a look at her and see if there are any ways that they can either systemically buff up Shyvana or otherwise convert Shyvana so that the AD builds, I think, feel a little bit better. Obviously, Riot aren't going to VGU her right now. I totally understand that. She was on the most recent poll. Once Riot release Udyr, they will probably put the poll back out for other votes for who they want to do next, or even when Udyr gets closer to release, Riot will probably put out the poll then to say, hey, who do you want to rework now? And Shyvana was on that poll, so she's likely to return, and she was pretty high up there as well. So again, Riot aren't going to be reworking her right now, and that's not really what I'm asking. I think that they should try to give Shyvana changes or give Shyvana buffs in ways that support the sort of AD fighter playstyle, as I feel like that's sort of closest to where Shyvana actually wants to be. The tank build is sort of dead. She doesn't have enough utility in order to make that function, and the on-hit build, I think, suffers for similar reasons to the AP build, right? In that it's sort of, you're very squishy and you don't have a lot of ways of actually making that build kind of work, because you are so not durable that you can't commit to fights for long periods of times, which is what I feel like Shyvana really wants to do. I think that there are a couple of small things that Riot could do, like giving her better base defenses at the cost of some of her AP ratios. I think especially, I don't think there's any reason to try and put power into Shyvana's kit in Twin Bite or in Burnout, because those abilities just don't get used for damage with AP Shyvana. So either reducing or removing those ratios in favor of more durable base stats, I think would go a long way towards making it feel slightly better, or otherwise potentially giving her AD ratios, very small AD ratios on things like Burnout, and potentially buffing up the AD ratio on Twin Bite as well. Those would be, I think, other good ways of making Shyvana more incentivized to want to commit to a sort of sustained in the brawl, doing a bunch of damage to champions. So those are just kind of my thoughts on this one, guys. I know I'm probably one of the biggest Shyvana stands around, so, if this video seems like it's totally out of left field, it kind of sort of is. But anyways, I did want to talk about this. If you guys have some suggestions about how to sort of fix around or otherwise change Shyvana, let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts, especially if you have other ideas, or if you don't think Shyvana at all needs changes, let me know that as well. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts if you think she's totally fine and you enjoy the AP playstyle. So anyways, if you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.